Welcome back. Again, I'm Dan and I'm an alcoholic. You probably already know that. So on 76, it starts to talk about steps 8 and 9. Where it says, now we need more action, without which we find that faith without works is dead. So let's look at steps 8 and 9. It says, we have listed all persons we have harmed and to whom we are willing to make amends. We made it when we took inventory. So here it's telling me that we made this list of the people we harmed when we took the inventory, which is why underneath each page of inventory it's important to consider each person that we're writing inventory on, and how have I harmed this person or anybody around this person, their family members, their friends, right? This is the scary one. This is the one that when you were new and you looked up on the wall and you look at the 12 steps and you say, they all look okay until that one. The fact is that you have to remember that the person that walks in the door and looks at that list initially is not the same person after they get to this point, right? And that when you've made this list and wrote inventory on these people and have had a change of heart towards these people, and also are starting to get a sense of a closeness with something that you've never really understood or been close to, by this point you probably will be in a place where you want more, right? It says we subjected ourselves to a drastic self-appraisal in the 4th step, and now we go out to our fellows and repair the damage done in the past. We attempt to sweep away the debris which has accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves, right? Which is what the 4th step was, a script on how I played God. If we haven't the will to do this, we ask until it comes. There's a difference between having the will to do something and willingness. Having the will to do something is the desire, right? The willingness is an action, right? A lot of people have the will to do it, but don't take any action on that. So why is that? There is only one reason to not take any action on something that you want to do, and that's fear. And we've seen throughout this process, in the 4-step process, how fear has robbed us of the life that we might have had if we weren't controlled by those fears, right? Here's another place that fear robs people of the life they might have had because they surrender to that fear. And you know what surrendering to the fear sounds like? Need some water. Let's see. The water had nothing to do with what it sounds like. I just needed some water. Surrendering to the fear sounds like this. You don't have to finish amends. Or is you're never going to be able to finish all your amends. That's what fear sounds like. Because you wouldn't, if you finished amends, be able to tell somebody that they don't have to finish amends. Right? Every time that I balked in my amends process, it was because of just that. It's fear. And it says down here, it says, remember it was agreed at the beginning we would go to any length for victory over alcohol. Remember earlier in the book, there was that line I read where I told you I tell people that I work with to initial that paragraph, where it says, where I ask them the question, are you willing to go to any length to get it? Well, now you're starting to see what any length is going to look like. When I work with people too, I says, look, I don't want to hear you in meetings tell people you're in the 9th step when you get to this point, after you've made this list of the people that you've harmed and the causes of that harm, or how you harmed them. Because you're only in the 8th step, really, becoming willing to make each amends. Right? And I've seen people get upset about that. They kind of just look at me like, because we're so anxious to move ahead. We want to say we're in the 8th step. We don't want to say you're in the... I want to say you're in the 9th step. You don't want to say you're in the 8th step. Right? It's kind of like when you're young. It's like, I want to tell you I'm 9. I don't want to tell you I'm 8 because I'm almost 9. Right? But 8 is such a big part of this. In some ways, we can make 8 more difficult than 9. We certainly spend more time on 8 than 9, becoming willing, right? To start off with, I have the people I work with get these index cards, right? 3.5 by 5 inch cards, or the thing they used to use before computers. And on that card, you put all the information for everybody on our men's list. And on the card, I write their name, their contact information if I have it or find, right? And then I'll list a specific harm that I'm aware of, right? And if you have one of those, the Big Book Awakenings, there's a little diagram in there of what I'm talking about. And I have them get all of this list down onto these cards. The reason I do that is because it was shown to me that I can go through this stack of cards and ask for intuition to tell me which is the next indicated amends, right? Because if you're just going down a list, you could get one that just is too much to deal with, so you just stop there, right? You're better off just picking what's the next indicated amends that I'm willing to do, that I'm ready to do, right? So after they get this stack of cards, I meet with them. And we go through each harm that they've listed on these cards. Right? And the things that I look for is exactly what it says to watch for in the book. Is making this amends going to cause more harm to the person that you're going to go to than good? Right? Is this going to serve any purpose for this other person, or is this going to complicate matters? Right? Because we certainly aren't trying to hurt anybody to save ourselves. Right? Is this something that's not going to fix anything? Right? An amend is not an apology. An apology is a sincere desire to set right. An apology is just a gesture to clear the air for some reason. Usually so I'm not uncomfortable around you. Right? Right? Gives me the false sense that I've handled my business. Right? An amends means something different. To amend something is to fix something. Right? To amend a constitution is to change something in a constitution so it's better for the future. Right? An amend is a sincere desire to set right a wrong, with the hopes that it will create something better from now on. Right? Mend something. Just to go to somebody to say, I'm sorry. Some of those people have heard, I'm sorry from me many times. Doesn't admit any guilt. Doesn't admit remorse. Right? I'm just trying to feel more comfortable. And I have the idea that I've done something. Right? A lot of times, after you've said you're sorry to someone, they still walk away upset. Or still hurt. Hasn't changed anything. Right? To amend something to me means I've affected something in my life with another person that will change that relationship. So, when I make the approach, that's also listed in that book. It's in the Big Book Awakening, but let me just read them off out of memory. What I tell the people I work with is there's some specific things to go to them with. I have to be willing to go to them to say, this is why I'm here, right? Which I don't necessarily always tell them on a spiritual path or in Alcoholics Anonymous. It doesn't always serve a good purpose, but sometimes it does, right? Especially if it's an old relationship, right? Because you don't want to go back to an old relationship thinking that you're just trying to fix things so that you can get back together. Use the amends process to, to get, don't want to say it, to get some action. Right? That's totally the wrong reason to do it. But I've seen it. I have one sponsee who ended up marrying someone he made amends to. He assured me that had nothing to, but I question that. But anyway, this is why I'm here. You might want to say I'm in a 12-step program, and I got to one of the steps of this 12-step program, and this is about straightening out my past. Right? Some people are glad to hear it, and some people aren't. I see somebody smiling. It's because it's an opportunity for some people to say what's been going on. Because I go to them open to not necessarily control the situation, but to let God guide the situation. So praying into it is always important. This is why I'm here. In the 12-step program, I've learned some things about past situations that I regret, and I'd like to know if that's okay that I share that with you. All right? And if I have the permission to do that, then I'll say these are the things that I'm aware of where I think that I've harmed you, and I'll read off the things if there's a lot of them, or it's usually better to know in your mind what they are. And not make it look so, because if you're just reading off a card, it could make it a little colder. But again, if there's a lot of things, you might not remember it all. This is the harm that I'm aware of. Right. And then the next question is there anything that I'm missing that you could think of that I'm not aware of where I've harmed you? And I just sit back and listen and let them say what they need to say to me. Right. And there's an immense freedom that I've seen happen with other people when they're sharing to me what I have done has hurt them or other people in their life. Right. And it can be a scary process to embark on, knowing that you're going to have to go to them like this and let them say what they need to say to you. Right? And when they're done, I ask them, is there anything else you could think of that how this has harmed you or people around you, your family, your friends? And if they have anything else to say, I let them say it. And when I'm sure that they're done saying what they need to say, then I follow up with, is there any way that I could possibly set this right between us? Set right the wrongs that I've done. And I have to be willing to do whatever I'm asked to set right those wrongs. All right? And I preface that within reason. Because we're not there to be abused. right? We're there to set right the wrongs, not to be taken advantage of necessarily, within reason. I mean, I've heard people, one of my own amends, when I asked the person, is there any way that I could set right the wrongs that I have done? They said, yeah, you could kill somebody for me. and I, that's a little bit beyond any length, right? Right? It's way beyond any length, right? But I've also heard other things that were not that obvious, but you have to be open, to be reasonable, and to be willing to do what this person wants to set right the wrong. They're going to appreciate an approach like that if you are honest and open and willing to do something to straighten out the situation. One of the things that I like doing while I'm sitting with someone going through these cards, and as I said, I listen for, will the amend hurt somebody more by doing it? I also listen for things that are goofy. I call them goofy amends. Right? Goofy amends is something that's, where you go to them with something and it's just kind of so petty it's stupid. Right? But I don't necessarily tell somebody which ones to do or which ones not to do. I might say something like, maybe you should pray on that one. Right? Because maybe that one is a little too, maybe that one's just your desire to be complete here, and it's little, if it's, sometimes a goofy amends can actually cause harm. Just, like, what are you here for? But if someone puts it on, if they feel it and it comes and they put it on paper and you discuss it, right, you can, when you say, hey, I think that one maybe really not an amends, right, they're going to trust you by that point, right? And they're going to feel hopefully secure that, okay, this one I'm going to pray about, maybe I don't have to do it. And we write little notes on each card, pray about it, ? Right? Or another pile might be trash pile, right? Right? But we don't necessarily call it the trash pile. That's the pray about it without the ? Right? I can't really say what is going on in this person's gut, right? I encourage them to pray about it and ask for the right direction with each card, unless it's really stupid. Also, as we go through, the ones that look like they're amends that should be made, and they're obvious, I ask them to consider, are they willing to do this amends or not willing to do this amends? So they put a plus and minus on the top of the card. Willing, not willing. All right. Naturally, you start with the ones that you're willing to do first. Put the ones that you aren't willing to do yet at the bottom of the stack. All right. The idea here is to, if I start with the ones I can do, I develop what it takes to do the ones that I can't do. All right. It's kind of like going to the gym. I've had a membership to a gym since the 1970s. It was just because it was so cheap to get it, and it was one of those, if you just keep renewing it, you'll have it forever. It's like $48 a year, right? So I've always been able to afford that, and obviously I haven't used it, and so I pay like $48 every time I go. But every time I go, I'm like all motivated. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to get into this. And you go in, and there's the dumbbells. There's the lighter ones over there, and there's the big ones over here with all the really big guys. And it's like, I want to start over here. And I think that's part of the reason I don't go back right away. Right? The amends process is kind of the same, right? If you start off with the ones that are going to be easy to do, you'll build up that thing that it's going to take you to do the next harder one, the next harder one. And don't get hung up on the ones that you're scared to do. Put them to the bottom of the pile if you can't do it. I mean, if you're moved to do it, right? But you go through the stack, and you're not going through the stack to make amends. All right? You're going through the stack of which ones you're going to set appointments on. All right? Don't get all hung up in the fear of what's going to happen. Just, you want to do it. This is the next one that's indicated. Make an appointment. Until you make the appointment, nothing is going to happen. The last thing I ever want to hear from people I work with is I'm praying for the willingness to be willing, to be willing, to be willing. Right? Because it's pointless. Right? It's pointless to pray for something that you're not going to do. The question? Mm-hmm. People spread around the country. Okay. Right. Right. I'll get to that. Right. The question was, how do you move to step 10 if you haven't finished 9? Right. I'll address that in a minute when we get to the promises. Okay. But just the quick answer is halfway through the amends process, we start 10. I start the people I work with on 10 and 11, but I encourage them to get halfway through, to get through the ones they can do initially. Right. The reason that I don't start them on 10 and 11 right away is this. Guys have a tendency, I work with a lot of guys, and guys have a tendency to be attached to the step they're on. I'm still trying to tell them they're in 8, and you start giving them 10, 11, and 12, they're telling people they're in 12. Right? It might be a manipulation on my part. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. But I liked them to show some effort first in 8, to become willing to make the ones they can make. Because they're not getting the power from 10 and 11. They've asked for the power in 7. Right? They said they were completely ready to turn to God for everything. Right? Well, now's the time to start practicing that. Right? So if you're not practicing 6 and 7, why should I give you 10 and 11? People put too much emphasis on 10 and 11, right, in this point. Right? I'd rather tell them they're back at 6. Right? I think that would serve them better. Right? Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. And certainly it was a good point, people that are far away and you can't make a face-to-face amends, they might have to be in the bottom of the list until you can get to that place to do that. But you make a stack of the ones you can do right away. And there's talking about the praying for the willingness to be willing, to be willing. There's actually an 8-step prayer posture. Right? You know what a prayer posture is? It's some people will sit just flat-footed on the ground in a chair with their hands up or down, or fingers touching. Right? Some people like to sit cross-legged on the ground and hands up. Right? That's a prayer posture. Well, here's the 8-step prayer posture. Right? You sit at a desk with your feet flat on the ground. Right? Your card's in front of you. Right? card in one hand, the next indicated amends in one hand, right? And the phone in front of you. You dial the number of the person that you have to make an appointment with, then you pray. The power will come when you need it. It won't come when you don't need it. Right? If you really have the will to do this, sit down and be accountable. If you're not willing, you're not going to do it. So you're not going to take the action. Right? That's why it's important to sit down with the ones you're willing to do, not the ones you're not willing to do. Not the ones that you're afraid of. Right? Because, we want to build up that thing that happens as we beat through these cards. And what happens as we go through the cards, they will tend to get harder, because as we get to the bottom of the stack, they're the ones that we've shoved to the bottom of the stack, right? For whatever reason. You might not have given it that much thought, but for some reason you didn't want to do that one yet, right? Could be that they're out of town, but it could also be that it's fear. And what happens is you find that as you get used to doing it, the more and more power comes. You hear a lot of people say that you can't finish amends. What they're really saying is they can't finish amends. And what I would agree with is that I can't finish amends. I got down to the last 5 cards. They were the ones that I absolutely didn't want to tell anybody were still there. Right? I didn't want anybody really to be behind me. I didn't tell my sponsor how many was left. I didn't tell the people in my home group. I really didn't want to do them. Could have easily just tossed them in the trash. Right? But by this time, I started to get a sense of something from this. That I didn't completely understand it, but I was so close to finishing all those amends. And my home group was a group that you couldn't even share in the meeting until you finished all your amends at the time. They've changed it since then, but because there's been a lot of new members in the group that haven't finished amends, and you'd only have a small group of people sharing over and over again. It was one thing when the group was smaller, but now it's 80 to 100 people every week. And a lot of them are just there to hear the message. And so the format was adjusted, and that was adjusted out. But I think we also lost something, because there was a certain, listening to people raise their hand and saying, I've done it, I've finished my last amends, and then hear them talk and hear that, you could see that something changes. So I had the example of the people that went before me. And I had these 5 amends that I didn't want to even talk about to anybody. And I didn't really even want to make them. But the fact is, even though I didn't want to make them, I did want to do what the people that went before me did, because I saw that there was something more for me. Right? I knew that there was more for me. And it turned out that those last 5 were the ones that I had to pray into, that I absolutely were too afraid to do. They were the ones that had me, after setting the appointment and showing up for the appointment, but I'm sitting in my car outside their house, my head on the steering wheel, shaking my head, thinking I'm taking this AA thing way too far. Afraid to death to get out and face the situations that was in front of me. Right? But over and over, one by one, they get handled. And there's something to be learned from that experience. Right? And that was when Dan maxes out on his power. right, and goes inside for more power comes. Right? And each one of those last amends reinforced how that could happen again and again and again, and how consistent it could be, and how much I could rely on that power being there. All I ever wanted from God is proof that there's a power that would work in my life. Right? Finishing those last 5 amends put me in a situation where I was face to face with my powerlessness and face to face with real power. Right? And that power was inside of me and worked through me. And, so I just had to go inside and get in touch with that deep inner landscape, which I've never been able to see or live out of. While I was sitting in that car with my head on the steering wheel, I was still in step 8. Right? You can't say that you're really in step 9 till you hear the noise. There's the noise that you hear when step 8 turns into step 9. And it sounds like this. Now you're in step 9. And they open the door and you come in and you have to talk about the things that you're aware of, and then let them reply with what you might have missed or probably missed. Right? It's interesting when somebody will go on and on about how you've hurt them, and you respond with that question that's in that list: is there anything else that you need to tell me? Right? A really good sign is when they start repeating the same things that they've already told you. Right? Because that means they can't think of anything else that you did that they have to tell you. Right? And then you watch them. It doesn't always happen, but I've seen it, especially with my first wife. As she started to see herself repeat the same things again and again, you kind of see this lightness come over her, like, okay, it's enough now. It caused a little lightness in me too when she saw that. So, when she decided that was enough, But when when they see that they've let you know everything they feel that they need to know about how you harmed them, and then you follow that up with, is there anything that I could possibly do to set right these wrongs that I've caused, that I regret having done? Right? There is an experience that happens when you see that you've set that other person free. And you realize that the process is not just about me. That the amends was just not about me feeling better. It was about me having an experience with God and helping them get free. To set right a situation in the world that I caused some kind of negative thing towards, or put some kind of negative thing out into the world that's hurt somebody else, or some other situation, or somebody's business, or... Right. There was graveside amends that I made. By the time I got sober, a lot of my family had passed away. My mother, my father, my grandparents. Through my drinking, I really took advantage of the family, and basically I was in survival mode. And in survival mode, you do things like steal money from family or friends, and right. Oh, I had all my stuff. I kept my television and my VCR, and but other people lost things. Right? But primarily, I stole money from my family to survive. Right, and that was one of the bigger things that I had to take to the graveside amends. And it seemed like it wouldn't be too hard because, sitting and talking about that stuff in front of a gravesite. What could really happen, right? Well, a lot can happen. I went with the same card that I made out just like I did for everybody else. People I work with, I suggest they take a picture of the person to the gravesite. Set it on top of the grave. Right? Sit there for a few minutes, asking God to guide the experience, and just sit quiet to clear your mind. Right? And then I proceeded to read off the cards just like my grandmother was there, because by that time, by the end, when my grandmother finally passed away, she had outlived my mother, and everything that was supposed to revert to my mother ended up reverting to her. And I went to her with this card and reading this card, talking about the things that I had done that harmed her with the money and some other situations. And then I asked the same question: is there anything else that you need to tell me? You know, I didn't hear anything, so that was a good sign. But then I asked the next question: is there any way that I could possibly set right the wrongs that I had caused? And then I sat quietly. And what came back through my consciousness was, you can't pay me back that money, but the people that you've hurt now are your brothers. And that didn't come from me. That is not something I wanted to hear. Right? You know, and what I realized is that I had to go to my brothers with what I had done to what I thought was did it to my grandmother, but her being out of the picture, the money that I had acquired, stole, ultimately would have ended up with them, split between us. Wasn't that much money, but I certainly put a dent in it. So I also tell people that do graveside amends to bring a box of Kleenex with them, right? Because it turned out to be a really emotional experience, and it turned out to be a really important experience. Just so happens that my grandfather and my mother and my grandmother are like next to each other. So, but I saved my grandmother for last because that's where I think some of the scarier stuff was. So, if I could say anything at this point, it's don't let fear stop you from having this experience. The experience that there is this power that can move you through these situations that you normally absolutely could not confront. That's the same thing that's guided my life forever, right? Allowing my fears to rob me of the life that I might have had. Right? The experience of the proof of this power deep down inside of me being able to work in my life is manifested in all areas of my life. Right? Because I know it's there. I got the proof that I've always wanted. Right? So, it's time for another break. Thanks. Then we'll move on from that point. And one of the things about the promises is it's an experience that, this is on the bottom of 83. It's an experience that we have as a result of being halfway through the 9-step process, which is why I ask them to come back when they're halfway through the 9-step process. Where it says if we're painstaking about this phase of our development, we'll be amazed before we're halfway through. And a lot of people really can't relate to it, partly because they haven't finished the 9th step. Right? But most of us can relate to something else, and that's or drinking. And because we've experienced the promises in another way. Right? But it was while drinking. So I'm going to change the words a little bit and read the 9-step promises, right? But for the promises that alcohol gave me. When I was painstaking about this phase of my drinking, I was amazed. I knew a new freedom and a new happiness when I was drinking. When I was drinking, I didn't regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. When I was drinking, I comprehended the word serenity and I knew peace. When I was drinking, no matter how far down the scale I had gone, I still thought my experience could benefit you. When I was drinking, that feeling of uselessness and self-pity disappeared. When I was drinking, I lost interest in selfish things and I gained interest in my fellows. I'll buy them all a drink. Because self-seeking slipped away. When I'm drinking, my whole attitude and outlook upon life changed. And when I'm drinking, the fear of people and of economic insecurity left me. When I'm drinking, I intuitively knew how to handle situations which dry used to baffle me. I quickly realized that alcohol was doing for me what I could not do for myself. Are these extravagant promises? No, they were fulfilled for years, right, while I was drinking. And sometimes quickly and sometimes slower. But they always materialized if I drank enough. Now here's another little thing that I've done. You could get this off my website too at thejaywalker.com. Looks like this. Basically, this is just an example of my obsession with the Big Book and the process. Remember, I used the term AA 12-step Big Book deconstructionist. Right? This is the bedevilments versus the promises. Right? We want to come here and we want to read the promises and say, yeah, I've got that one, or I've got that one, and I want to... Well, I cut up little pieces of paper and matched up all the bedevilments next to the promises, right? And they lined up strangely perfectly, right? And note too that the promises are only 31 pages after page 52, the bedevilments. How many books have you read that were more than 31 pages that didn't promise as much as this does? Right? On page 52 in the bedevilments, it says we were having trouble with personal relationships. Oh, let me make a note of it. Mention this. If you can relate to page 52, you don't have the promises. Right? In the bedevilments, page 52, it says we were having trouble with personal relationships. The promise in 83 says, I'll lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in my fellows, that self-seeking will slip away. Pardon me? Oh. In 52, it says we couldn't control our emotional natures. On page 83, it says, I'll comprehend the word serenity and know peace. Page 52, it says, we were prey to misery and depression. In the promise, it says, my whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. The bedevilment says on page 52, we couldn't make a living. The promise says, fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave me. On page 52, it says, we had a feeling of uselessness. The promise on 83 says that feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. The bedevilments on page 52 says we were full of fear. The promise on 83 says we will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. The bedevilment on 52 says we were unhappy. The promise on 83 says we're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. The bedevilment on page 52 says we couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. The promise on page 83 says no matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. And most of all, the promise on 83 says we will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. If I do the things in between page 52 and 83, I could experience the promises in my life. Right. If you want that, again, it's on the jwalker.com website, along with the inventory formats and some other stuff. It's in a PDF file that you can just download. Okay. I'm going to stop here. We're just going to pick up on step 10.